Kentucky holds secrets that defy everything most Americans believe about this state. Beyond bourbon and horses lies a landscape of unbelievable natural phenomena, hidden historical turning points, and shocking geographic realities that have shaped the nation in ways rarely acknowledged. This video will reveal the extraordinary truths about Kentucky that textbooks conveniently ignore, and by the end, you'll understand why this single state has influenced American culture, geology, and history far more than anyone realizes. If you enjoy discovering hidden and surprising facts like these, consider subscribing to the channel. Fact 1. The Mammoth Cave Paradox. Most people assume Kentucky's Mammoth Cave is just another tourist attraction with a few tunnels. The reality is staggering. Mammoth Cave is not simply the world's longest known cave system. It is longer than the next 3 longest caves on Earth combined. Over 420 miles of surveyed passageways exist beneath Kentucky's surface, and experts believe another 600 miles remain undiscovered. To put this in perspective, you could walk from Louisville to Lexington entirely underground if all passages connected. This subterranean labyrinth formed over 10 million years, creating an ecosystem so unique that 8 species found nowhere else on the planet live in its Yongju darkness. The cave's scale challenges our understanding of geological time itself. Fact 2. Kentucky's vanishing river, the Lost River in Bowling Green, does something most people would consider impossible. This waterway literally disappears into the ground, flows through underground caves for miles, then resurfaces as a completely different river. For centuries, settlers could not understand where the water went. Modern dye tests prove the Lost River feeds into the hidden river, emerging 9 miles away. During heavy rains, the underground passages cannot handle the volume, causing the river to reappear on the surface temporarily. This phenomenon occurs nowhere else in North America with such dramatic effect. The Lost River represents one of Kentucky's most visible connections to the vast cave systems that honeycomb the entire region, systems that continue to drain entire lakes and streams without warning. Fact 3. The nation's gold vault. Most Americans believe the gold at Fort Knox is simply stored there for safekeeping. The truth involves far greater strategic importance. The United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox holds 147.3 million ounces of gold, representing roughly 3% of all gold ever refined in human history. The vault's construction in 1936 used 16,000 cubic feet of granite, 4,200 cubic yards of concrete, 750 tons of reinforced steel, and 670 tons of structural steel. No single person knows the complete combination to the vault. The facility has been opened only once for visitors, in 1974, when a congressional delegation and journalists were allowed a brief tour. During World War II, Fort Knox also secretly protected the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Gettysburg Address. Kentucky's bedrock was chosen specifically because it sits on one of the most geologically stable regions in North America. Fact 4. The Underground Railroad's True Path history textbooks suggest the Underground Railroad primarily ran through northern states. Kentucky's role was far more crucial and dangerous than commonly acknowledged. Despite being a slave state, Kentucky became the most critical crossing point for enslaved people fleeing to freedom, with over 75% of escapees passing through its borders. The Ohio River's narrowness at certain Kentucky points created natural crossing zones. Free black communities in cities like Louisville operated safe houses with extraordinary risk as Kentucky law imposed severe penalties on anyone aiding runaways. The Rankin House in Ripley, Ohio, across from Kentucky, displayed a lantern visible for miles, guiding thousands to freedom. Kentucky's position made it simultaneously the most dangerous and most necessary state in the entire Underground Railroad network. Without Kentucky's geography and the courage of its resistance networks, the Underground Railroad would have functioned far less effectively. Fact 5. The bourbon barrel economy. People know Kentucky produces bourbon, but few understand the staggering scale. Kentucky currently holds more barrels of aging bourbon than it has human residents, with approximately 3 million barrels aging in warehouses across the state and a population of 4. 5 million, bourbon barrels outnumber people 2 to 1. Each barrel loses roughly 3 to 4% of its volume annually to evaporation, called the angel share. Collectively, Kentucky's bourbon industry sends roughly 19 million bottles worth of bourbon into the atmosphere every single year. This evaporation creates a unique atmospheric phenomenon. A black fungus called Baudoinia compniacensis grows on buildings, trees, and cars near distilleries, fed by bourbon-scented air. The economic impact reaches $9 billion annually, but the cultural reality is even more striking. 95% of the world's bourbon must legally be made in Kentucky due to specific limestone water and aging conditions. Fact 6. Kentucky's Native American absence. Most states have ancient Native American settlement sites. Kentucky has virtually none, and the reason reveals a darker historical reality. Despite being surrounded by major tribal territories, Cherokee to the south, Shawnee to the north, Iroquois to the east, Kentucky served primarily as a hunting ground, not a permanent home. Archaeological evidence shows that around 1450 CE, large Native American populations mysteriously abandoned the region. Researchers now believe Kentucky became a deliberate neutral zone, a buffer between hostile nations. When settlers arrived in the 1700s, they found abundant game and no resistance, not because the land was unclaimed, but because it served as a carefully maintained no man's land. This absence made Kentucky's colonization uniquely peaceful initially, then extraordinarily violent when tribes recognized the threat. The dark and bloody ground nickname reflects not ancient settlements, but the brutal territorial conflicts that erupted when this buffer zone collapsed. Fact 7. The earthquake that changed the Mississippi in 1811 and 1812, the most powerful earthquakes in American history, struck Kentucky and the surrounding region. These New Madrid earthquakes reached an estimated magnitude of 7, 5 to 8, 0, and fundamentally altered the landscape. Eyewitnesses reported the Mississippi River flowing backward for several hours, church bells ringing in Boston from the vibrations, and cracks opening in the ground that swallowed entire forests. Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee formed when the earthquake dropped land 8 to 20 feet, instantly creating a 15,000-acre lake. The earthquakes rang church bells 1,000 miles away and were felt across 50,000 square miles. Kentucky sits on the Reelfoot Rift, a failed continental rift from 500 million years ago. This ancient weakness in the Earth's crust means Kentucky faces a 7 to 10% chance of another magnitude 6, 0 or greater earthquake within the next 50 years. Most residents remain completely unaware of this ongoing seismic threat. Fact 8. The moonbow phenomenon. Cumberland Falls in southeastern Kentucky produces something that exists in only one other location on Earth. On clear nights during a full moon, the waterfall creates a moonbow, a rainbow generated by moonlight rather than sunlight. This phenomenon requires perfect conditions, a full moon, clear skies, and the massive volume of water vapor produced by the 68-foot waterfall. Cumberland Falls shares this distinction with only Victoria Falls in Africa. The moonbow appears in shades of white and silver to the human eye, though long exposure photographs reveal the full spectrum of colors our eyes cannot detect in low light. Native American tribes considered the site sacred, believing the moonbow served as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. The physics involved are identical to daylight rainbows, but the reduced light creates an ethereal effect that seems to defy natural law. Thousands travel to Cumberland Falls each month during full moons, hoping to witness this rare intersection of geology, astronomy, and optics. Fact 9. Kentucky's secret sandstone arches. Most people associate natural arches with Utah. Kentucky contains more natural stone arches than any other state east of the Mississippi River, with over 900 documented formations. Red River Gorge alone holds more than 100 sandstone arches, carved over millions of years by wind and water. Some arches span 100 feet and tower 75 feet high, yet remain virtually unknown outside geological circles. The arches formed when the region sat beneath an ancient sea, depositing layer upon layer of sediment. When the sea retreated and the land uplifted, softer rock eroded away, leaving the harder sandstone structures. These arches create microclimates, supporting plant species typically found hundreds of miles south. The concentration of arches in such a small geographic area has no parallel in the eastern United States. Kentucky's arch formations rival those of the Southwest in complexity and beauty, yet receive a fraction of the recognition or protection. Fact 10. The Corvette's exclusive home, every Chevrolet Corvette ever built since 1981 has been manufactured in one location, Bowling Green, Kentucky. This exclusivity is unique in the automotive world. The National Corvette Museum sits adjacent to the factory, and in 2014 a massive sinkhole opened beneath the museum floor, swallowing 8 rare Corvettes worth millions. The sinkhole was 40 feet wide and 60 feet deep, caused by the same karst topography that creates Kentucky's cave systems. Engineers had to carefully extract the cars, which were crushed and damaged, and the museum now displays the damaged vehicles alongside the sinkhole. The incident revealed the geological instability beneath much of southern Kentucky, where underground voids can collapse without warning. Despite this, production never stopped. Bowling Green remains the exclusive manufacturer of America's sports car, producing roughly 35,000 Corvettes annually. The plant's location in Kentucky was chosen for its central position, skilled workforce, and transportation infrastructure, but the karst geology remains a perpetual concern. Fact 11. The Appalachian Mountain origin Kentucky's eastern border contains a secret written in stone. The Appalachian Mountains that run through Kentucky are older than bones. These mountains formed approximately 480 million years ago, when the supercontinent Pangaea collided with other landmasses. At their peak, the Appalachians may have been as tall as the modern Himalayas. What visitors see today represents the eroded remnants of these ancient giants. The rocks in Kentucky's mountains contain fossils from shallow seas that covered the region before the collision. Some formations preserve ripple marks from beaches that existed when the first fish evolved. The coal seams throughout eastern Kentucky formed from vast swamp forests that grew when the mountains were young and the climate was tropical. This coal, now the center of Kentucky's energy economy, represents compressed forests from a time when giant dragonflies and millipedes dominated the landscape. The mountains themselves are still tectonically active, though their growth ceased hundreds of millions of years ago. Fact 12. Lincoln's Kentucky Paradox. Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky in 1809, but few realized the profound irony of his birthplace. Kentucky was a slave state, and Lincoln's own family owned enslaved people before moving to Indiana. The Lincolns left Kentucky specifically because they opposed slavery, yet Kentucky produced both Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy. During the Civil War, Kentucky attempted to remain neutral, declaring it would fight for neither side. This neutrality collapsed when Confederate forces invaded, forcing Kentucky to align with the Union while still maintaining slavery until the 13th Amendment. More than 100,000 Kentuckians fought for the Union while roughly 35,000 fought for the Confederacy, creating a literal brother-against-brother scenario in countless families. Kentucky holds the distinction of being the only state to have monuments to both Lincoln and Davis on Capitol grounds. This internal division shaped Kentucky's culture in ways that persist today, creating a state identity caught between North and South. Fact 13. The Blue People of Kentucky. In the early 1800s, a French orphan named Martin Fugate settled in eastern Kentucky. He carried a rare genetic mutation that would create one of medical science's most unusual case studies. Fugate and his wife Elizabeth, who unknowingly carried the same recessive gene, had children with blue skin. The condition, called methemoglobinemia, results from a deficiency in the enzyme diaphorase, causing blood to appear blue through the skin. For over 150 years, the Fugate family intermarried within their isolated community, concentrating the gene. By the 1960s, blue-skinned descendants were still being born. The condition caused no health problems beyond the dramatic skin color. A hematologist named Madison Coween tracked down the family in 1960 and successfully treated the condition with methylene blue injections. The Fugate family's isolation demonstrates how Kentucky's mountain geography created genetic islands. Today, the gene likely still exists in the population, dormant in heterozygous carriers who show no symptoms but could produce blue children if they married another carrier. Fact 14. The billion-dollar horse industry. Kentucky's horse industry generates $3 billion annually, but the true scale involves far more than racing. Kentucky contains more than 35 million acres dedicated to horse farms, with over 242,000 horses residing in the state. The limestone bedrock that underlies the Bluegrass region creates uniquely mineral-rich water and grass, producing stronger bones in horses. This geological advantage has made Kentucky the undisputed center of thoroughbred breeding worldwide. The most expensive horse ever sold at auction was a Kentucky-born colt purchased for $16 million. Keeneland, one of Kentucky's premier auction houses, regularly sells horses for millions, with total annual sales exceeding $500 million. The industry employs over 40,000 people directly and supports an additional 80,000 jobs indirectly. Beyond economics, Kentucky law treats horses with unusual reverence. It remains illegal to carry an ice cream cone in your back pocket, a law originally designed to prevent horse theft by luring horses away with treats. Fact 15. The birthplace of bluegrass music. Bluegrass music originated in Kentucky in the 1940s, created by Bill Monroe and named after his band, the Bluegrass Boys. What most people do not realize is that bluegrass represented a deliberate reconstruction of American roots music. Monroe combined Scottish fiddle traditions, African American blues, gospel harmonies, and Appalachian folk songs into a new form. The genre's signature sound, fast tempos, complex harmonies, and acoustic instruments played with virtuosic skill, was deliberately innovative, not traditional. Monroe's most famous song, Blue Moon of Kentucky, was later covered by Elvis Presley, bridging bluegrass and rock and roll. The International Bluegrass Music Museum in Owensboro preserves the genre's history, but the music itself continues to evolve. Modern bluegrass incorporates jazz, rock, and classical influences while maintaining the core instrumental lineup. Kentucky's creation of bluegrass parallels its bourbon industry, taking existing traditions, refining them through unique local conditions, and producing something recognized worldwide as distinctly Kentuckian. Fact 16. The atomic secret of Paducah. In 1950, the United States government built a massive gaseous diffusion plant in Paducah, Kentucky, to enrich uranium for nuclear weapons. The plant operated in near-total secrecy for decades, processing uranium through a technique that separates isotopes based on weight. At its peak, the Paducah gaseous diffusion plant covered 750 acres and employed over 2,000 workers. The facility produced enriched uranium for every nuclear weapon in the American arsenal during the Cold War. What workers were not told was the extreme contamination occurring inside the plant. Radioactive waste leaked into the ground, contaminating soil and groundwater with technetium-99, a radioactive isotope with a half-life of 211,000 years. The cleanup effort, ongoing since the plant closed in 2013, is expected to cost over $11 billion and take 70 years to complete. Paducah residents lived for decades unaware that one of the nation's most critical nuclear facilities operated in their community. The plant's legacy demonstrates how national security priorities override local safety concerns. Fact 17. The mysterious Kentucky meat shower. On March 3, 1876, a clear Kentucky sky began raining meat over Bath County. Chunks of fresh meat, ranging from 2 to 4 inches square, fell from the sky for several minutes, covering an area roughly 100 yards long and 50 yards wide. 2 men who tasted the meat identified it as mutton or venison. The event was witnessed by multiple people, including Mrs. Crouch, who was making soap when the meat began falling. Scientists proposed various explanations: a flock of vultures regurgitating simultaneously, a meteorite carrying organic material, or a freak tornado lifting decomposing animal carcasses. The most credible theory suggests vultures, which must regurgitate to take flight when startled, release their stomach contents while flying overhead. However, this fails to explain why the meat appeared fresh, not partially digested. Samples preserved at the time were later identified as lung tissue from either a horse or a human infant. The Kentucky meat shower remains one of the strangest atmospheric phenomena in American history, never satisfactorily explained despite 150 years of investigation. Fact 18. The hidden scale of Daniel Boone's exploration history remembers Daniel Boone as an explorer and frontiersman, but his impact on Kentucky was essentially colonial conquest disguised as adventure. Boone did not discover Kentucky. Native American hunting parties had used the region for thousands of years, and French explorers had mapped it decades earlier. What Boone actually accomplished was opening Kentucky to mass settlement by white colonists. His journey through the Cumberland Gap in 1775 brought 30 settlers. Within 20 years, Kentucky's white population exceeded 220,000. Boone's Wilderness Road became the primary migration route, funneling hundreds of thousands westward. This influx displaced and destroyed Native American societies that had maintained Kentucky as neutral territory. Boone himself was a complex figure. He was captured by Shawnee warriors and adopted into the tribe, living with them for months. He later fought against his former captors, defending settlements he had established. Boone eventually left Kentucky, dying in Missouri, disillusioned by the land speculation and legal battles that followed settlement. His legacy is not exploration but transformation. He turned Kentucky from a carefully maintained buffer zone into one of America's fastest-growing states. Fact 19. The Louisville Flood of 1937. In January 1937, the Ohio River rose to unprecedented levels, flooding Louisville and creating one of the worst natural disasters in American history. The river crested at 1 feet, nearly 30 feet above flood stage, submerging 70% of Louisville underwater. Over 175,000 people were evacuated, and 90 people died. The flood covered 12,000 city blocks, destroyed 6,000 buildings, and left 200,000 homeless across the Ohio River Valley. Rescue efforts used boats to navigate city streets, and the Red Cross established refugee camps. Photographs show downtown Louisville transformed into a vast lake, with only rooftops and the upper floors of buildings visible. The flood occurred during the Great Depression, compounding the economic devastation. In response, the federal government built an extensive flood wall system around Louisville and other river cities. These flood walls, completed in 1953, now protect against floods up to 60 feet. The 1937 flood permanently changed Kentucky's relationship with the Ohio River, transforming it from a commercial highway into a managed threat requiring constant vigilance. Fact 20. The Hatfield-McCoy feud reality. The Hatfield-McCoy feud has been romanticized into American folklore, but the reality was far more brutal and complex. The conflict began in 1863 and continued for nearly 30 years, resulting in at least 13 deaths and numerous injuries. The feud started over a stolen pig, escalated through a forbidden romance, and exploded after 3 of Randolph McCoy's sons executed Devil Anse Hatfield's brother. The violence occurred along the Kentucky-West Virginia border, with both families using the state line strategically to escape prosecution. The media sensationalized the conflict, portraying it as evidence of Appalachian backwardness. The reality involved economic competition over timber and land rights, compounded by Civil War allegiances. The Hatfields supported the Confederacy while the McCoys sided with the Union. At its peak, the feud involved raids with 20 to 30 armed men attacking homes at night. The conflict only ended when the governors of Kentucky and West Virginia negotiated a truce and prosecuted family members. 8 Hatfields were imprisoned for life, and 1 was executed. The feud's legacy damaged Appalachian Kentucky's reputation for generations, creating stereotypes that persist today. Fact 21. Kentucky's unique neutral strip. During the Civil War, Kentucky declared itself neutral, refusing to secede but also refusing to support the Union militarily. For several months in 1861, Kentucky existed in a legal gray zone, neither in the Confederacy nor fully committed to the Union. Both sides respected Kentucky's neutrality initially because they recognized its strategic importance. Whoever controlled Kentucky controlled the Ohio River and access to the Western Confederacy. The state legislature banned both Union and Confederate troops from entering Kentucky's borders. This neutrality collapsed when Confederate General Leonidas Polk invaded Columbus, Kentucky, seizing the high ground overlooking the Mississippi River. The invasion forced Kentucky to choose sides, and the legislature voted to support the Union while still allowing slavery. Kentucky then became a battleground, with over 400 battles and skirmishes fought on its soil. The state's failed neutrality created a unique cultural legacy. Kentucky was the only state to officially remain in the Union while having a star on the Confederate flag. This ambiguity has shaped Kentucky's identity, creating a state that identifies neither as fully Northern nor Southern. Fact 22. The Great Onyx Cave War in the 1920s, Kentucky's cave tourism industry erupted into actual violence. The Great Onyx Cave War involved rival cave owners fighting for tourist dollars in the Mammoth Cave region. Cave owners posted armed guards at road intersections to force tourists toward their caves. They erected false signs directing travelers to competitor caves that led to dead ends or dangerous routes. Some owners employed cappers, men who met incoming trains and buses, lying about which caves were worth visiting. The conflict escalated when Mammoth Cave's owners attempted to purchase surrounding land to create a national park, threatening to put smaller cave operators out of business. Gunfire was exchanged, tourist vehicles were sabotaged, and legal battles consumed fortunes. The violence only ended when the federal government successfully established Mammoth Cave National Park in 1941, buying out most private cave owners. The Cave War revealed the cutthroat nature of Kentucky's early tourism industry and demonstrated how natural wonders could become economic battlegrounds. Today, the region's remaining commercial caves operate peacefully, but the era of armed cave competition remains a bizarre chapter in American tourism history. Fact 23. Kentucky's limestone water advantage. The limestone bedrock underlying central Kentucky creates water with unique chemical properties that have shaped multiple industries. Limestone naturally filters water, removing impurities while adding calcium and magnesium. This mineral-rich water is critical for bourbon production. The minerals interact with grain during fermentation, creating specific flavor profiles impossible to replicate elsewhere. The same water strengthens horse bones, giving Kentucky thoroughbreds a developmental advantage. The limestone formation extends 300 feet deep in some areas, creating a natural aquifer that supplies unlimited clean water. This geological feature attracted early settlers and continues to support Kentucky's economy. The limestone also creates the karst topography responsible for Kentucky's caves, sinkholes, and disappearing streams. This same geology poses risks. Sinkholes can open suddenly when underground caverns collapse, swallowing buildings, roads, and even entire ponds. In 2013, a sinkhole in Bowling Green swallowed 8 Corvettes at the National Corvette Museum. Kentucky's limestone is simultaneously the source of its greatest economic advantages and its most unpredictable geological hazard. Fact 24. The original fried chicken Colonel Harlan Sanders developed his fried chicken recipe in Corbin, Kentucky in 1940, but the story behind KFC involves far more struggle than success. Sanders ran a service station with an attached restaurant, serving meals to travelers. When a new interstate highway bypassed his location in 1955, his business collapsed overnight. At age 65, broke and living on Social Security, Sanders began traveling door to door to restaurants, cooking his chicken and trying to convince owners to buy his recipe. He slept in his car and was rejected over 1,000 times before his first success. Sanders franchised his recipe rather than opening company stores, creating a business model that spread Kentucky Fried Chicken worldwide. By 1964, he had 600 franchises and sold the company for $2 million, a fraction of its later value. Sanders remained the brand's spokesman until his death in 1980, becoming one of the most recognizable faces in advertising history. His white suit and string tie became synonymous with Kentucky itself. KFC now operates in over 150 countries, making Sanders' recipe Kentucky's most successful cultural export. The original restaurant in Corbin still operates as a KFC with a museum dedicated to Sanders' life. Fact 25: the mysterious Kentucky cave mummies. In the early 1800s, miners discovered perfectly preserved human remains inside Kentucky's caves, leading to the state's little-known mummy trade. The dry, cool cave environment naturally mummified bodies, preserving them for centuries. The most famous, Fawn Hoof, was a young Native American woman found in Short Cave in 1811. Her body was so well preserved that hair, skin, and clothing remained intact. Entrepreneurs immediately recognized the commercial potential, displaying mummies in traveling shows and charging admission. Fawn Hoof's remains were exhibited across the United States and Europe for over 100 years. Cave mummies revealed significant information about pre-Columbian populations, including dietary habits, diseases, and burial practices. Most were eventually returned to Native American tribes for proper burial, but some remain in museum collections. The existence of these mummies proves that despite the lack of permanent settlements, Native Americans used Kentucky's caves extensively for burial, shelter, and ceremony. The mummy trade represents a shameful chapter in Kentucky's history, where scientific curiosity and profit motives overrode basic respect for the dead. Today, federal and state laws protect Native American remains, but Kentucky's caves likely still hold undiscovered burials. These facts reveal a Kentucky that exists far beyond the stereotypes of horses and bourbon. If any of these surprised you, leave a comment about which fact you found most shocking. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Kentucky's hidden history and geography, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth explorations of places you thought you knew.